in some very tough times. A pandemic, a race war, an economy about to implode, and unemployment rates never heard of before. And obviously, your newfound fear of coughing in the public. Who knew that a harmless sneeze or a cough at the supermarket would produce the same reaction as shouting Allahu Akbar? And I understand it can be very hard to focus on just one thing right now. But today, we want to draw your focus to one issue. And hopefully, through that issue, we can equip you guys with the tools to generate your own change, even from the safety of your own homes. Today, we're talking about what the UN describes as the world's worst humanitarian crisis, Yemen. The land has been locked in an ideological proxy war since 2011, with various forces wrestling for control to establish their own view of a national identity. And the already complex conflict has been exacerbated by the formation of the coalition, a cabal of other regions led by the US and Saudi Arabia, which has only caused the war to worsen. Multiple airstrikes have been deployed by the coalition to regain control. Yet it's estimated that almost a third of the missile strikes have been targeted on non-military zones, leading to the deaths of innocent families at weddings, sick people in the hospitals, and even young children who are just going to school. And that's just one of the country's issues. Approximately 500,000 people suffer from acute malnutrition. On top of that, since 2016, there's been a horrible cholera outbreak, the consequences of which have been severed to this day. The borders of Yemen have been closed, which has led to the restriction of aid such as medicines, food, and water. And last but not the least, a plethora of failed peace plans. And now, COVID-19, the newest calamity to hit the country. Certain steps have been taken to try and lessen the spread, but unlike the West, Yemen doesn't have trillions of dollars to stimulate their economy. So businesses, marketplaces, and restaurants, whatever remains of them, of course, have to remain open. Because in places like Yemen, people don't live check to check. They live meal to meal. Yemen is ranked 166 in the poverty rate of the world, with the average wage almost being $2, not the minimum wage, the average wage. And their doctors, well, they're on the front lines using dated equipment and technology with no access to newer facilities. I know this all sounds overwhelming. Obviously, we can't fix it all. We can't just leave it like the others and say it's all in the hands of Allah, because Islam teaches us not just to have faith, but to produce action. Allah asks us to strive in His sake and take action. Yes, we should make dua for our brothers and sisters in Libya, in Sudan, and in Yemen, but we should also commit action. Today, we talked about Yemen, but what we're really here to talk about is how you can help with this topic of conversation. And so that's why we want to talk about how you can be a part of something bigger. Through this episode, we will analyze and we'll try to help you realize that no matter if you're 10 or 20, 15 or even 55, you can create change. You can start your own movement to aid, whether it's for the citizens of Yemen or the people of color suffering racial prejudice. To help you realize the change that you bring, we have invited a few people who often sacrifice their time to enrich the lives of others in places as far as Yemen and as close as Edmonton. Our first speaker is Brother Omar Taliani, who is a dedicated volunteer at Islamic Relief Canada, where he provides help and services for people in desperate need of humanitarian services and helps sponsor orphans. Our second speaker is Brother Sulaiman Khurshed, who works at Human Concern International, where he provides project-based aid such as temporary learning centers and water filtration facilities. They are examples of how they're examples, and they'll help you give insight on how you can be the beacon of light that inspires others around you, and how you can be the change. So now let's begin. Please welcome our guests into the studio.
Go ahead.
Hey.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Salam. So let's get started by you guys introducing yourselves and what you guys do. You want to start, Brother Omar?
Yeah, sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Brother Abdullah, for having us and inviting us on the show today, and to all the the young fellows back behind the scenes that scramble to put everything together. I saw the action that's happening. MashaAllah, it's nice to see that the Al-Rashid basement has, what I remember when I was much younger, where I started my schooling here in kindergarten, and it's grown into like a full-out studio production, mashallah. So it's really great to see the changes in the investment that you guys are making as youth. That's awesome. So myself, you introduced me as a current volunteer of Islamic Relief, which was the case a few years ago. I did volunteer for a number of years, but then I eventually got into, so I volunteered with Islamic Relief and other organizations, but then I got into Islamic Relief as a coordinator, and then eventually became the manager, the regional manager for fundraising in Western Canada. And I've moved away from that role, and now just kind of helping facilitate things in Edmonton and other areas as well too, lending a hand of support to the team and the organization. So that's kind of my brief introduction about Islamic Relief. I'll turn over to
that's great, mashallah. Brother Sulaiman, do you want to let us know what you're into?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here with you all. It's amazing to see what you guys are doing. It's a benefit for all of us. I mean, to give us the opportunity to what we are doing to help the people around the world. I am with the Human Concern International. I'm the regional fundraising officer in Edmonton here. And HCI is being established 40 years ago. It started out with a good intention and sincere brothers in Calgary, actually, in Calgary, believe it or not. And the few brothers that started out there, they was within the intention of helping people in the war between Afghanistan and Russia at that time. They then moved. is operating in 40 different countries with helping people around the world.
MashaAllah. Okay, so do you guys want to talk about, we talked about initially how we're facing a crisis in Yemen, and as we know that you guys, your institutions are doing a lot for the people in Yemen. You guys want to touch on how you guys are helping the people in Yemen right now?
Yeah, for sure. So Yemen, like you had said in the introduction, is going through so much suffering and devastation, and unless you're constantly kind of kept up with current events, you don't realize how fast the situation is getting worse and worse, right? So you did mention that, I believe you mentioned that the cholera outbreak there was, a huge, devastating, thing that took place there. And it's still taking place, and just to kind of iterate some points that some people might not be aware about. So the cholera outbreak that happened in Yemen was, the UN categorized it as the worst cholera outbreak in history, right? And so, because of having, lack of access to clean water and, food and nutrition, this is where these like preventable diseases come from. And so if you imagine like a cholera outbreak happening in or famine outbreak happening in Canada, you'd be like, no way, like you're crazy, like how can that happen, right? Because we have such easy access to things like that. So imagine a country that has, 20, 30 million people living there, and most of the people living there are, need access to humanitarian aid, right? That's like, unless you you can really imagine that's a huge, imagine 24 million people. That's some of the stats that we have here. I'm sure we're sure some stats. So I'm gonna run off some stats, and I'm pretty sure that they have the similar stats that they've also researched. But 24 million people in Yemen need humanitarian aid just to survive.
So what are some things that you guys have done recently that you could tell us about? Yeah,
so I'll get into that as well too. So just to kind of rattle off some numbers here, just to kind of show what we are doing, what HCI and other organizations are doing. But whatever we're doing, it's just putting a dent in the overall situation of things. So I'm going to just kind of give people an understanding of exactly how dire the situation is over there. So over 19 million people need access to healthcare. Over 17 million people need water and sanitation facilities, right? That's like half the population in Canada. Imagine that, needing access to clean water and sanitation, right? Over 3 million people are internally displaced. So that means, there's been an war outbreak and, violence and all these other catastrophic things that are happening. And so people are running away from their homes because they can't stay there. So now they're internally displaced. They're either going to camps or they're, shifting from town to town because they have nowhere to go, right? And right now, Yemen is also on the brink of famine. And the UN has reported that with its partners, they're delivering aid to more than 10 million people every month in Yemen. So just imagine that. Like, this is a huge, huge crisis, right? So we don't want to kind of underestimate it because it's not getting enough, enough in the news wire, enough on your social media feeds, enough in the current news. So we just kind of got to reiterate that point, to how dire the situation is over there. And then the top three things that they need access to, the people of Yemen, is what we call WASH, which is water access, sanitation and hygiene, and then food as well, and health care as well.
Just things we take for granted, and people are in dire need of that.
Absolutely.
Brother Sulaiman, do you want to add on to that?
Just to add is, like Brother Umar said, it's a situation that needs not only our attention, but it's a worldwide attention that should be focusing on it. However, that's not happening. The people, it's 80% of the population in Yemen right now depend on aid. 80%, just imagine. The young women, children, adults, it's unbelievable. What organization like we do here, like the Brother Omar said, it's just a dent, right? It's just a dent to help the less fortunate people in Yemen. We are in Yemen doing medical work, just like Islamic Relief. We are trying to educate people. We are doing food programs. We did establish 3 bakery there actually, to help people, where we deliver like 4,000 loaves of bread every day to the less fortunate people.
That's great.
So that's a few things.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so clearly your institution that you guys are a part of, like, they're doing great stuff. So the topic of conversation we're trying to have is, how do we inspire our youth to become parts of these organizations? So I guess a good way to start would be, how did you get into volunteering?
That's a very good question. Very good question. How I got into volunteering. As youth, from my perspective, we look at, they are the light of any community. When I was a young boy in my youth, I can vividly remember with my grandfather. He took me from home to build a mosque, So getting involved, you have to be dedicated and sincere of what you're doing. But that's being said, unless you are being led into that environment, right? You are being led to, from the beginning, that, okay, this is what you do, and this is what's going to benefit the community and people at large, right? So after, at that time, building that mosque, it sticks into you. It's something that stands out. So if you look at what you are doing here, the youth here, this is something you will remember. And this is something you can build on to develop a community that can take the leadership role and move forward. HCI is in the forefront of encouraging the youth. In, not only here, in everywhere we go. With our programs, we have programs to develop the youth.
Brother Omar, do you have a story that sticks out?
There's my introduction to volunteering, like what Sulaiman had said, came through encouragement from family members, right? So this is kind of where I started. Having a relative say, we're going to come with me, I'm going to attend this event, or come with me, I'm going to help out with this event or whatever. And that was when I was, end of high school, early university, right? Plus, man, obviously got involved much earlier than myself, but so it's just kind of like a spark of the moment type of experience you have, for myself at least, where it's just like, I went to something, I intended it, and I helped out with that, particular event, and then I just was, interested in it afterwards, right?
Yep.
It was something to do. Right, you get to meet people as well too, and there's just different reasons that you get inspired as a volunteer to kind of get your foot through the door, right? And like Brother Sulaiman said, we have, alhamdulillah, with Islamic Relief, one of the greatest things that I want to just kind of share a couple more facts here as well too, to kind of give you a perspective of how valuable volunteers are, just before we start to kind of digging into the, the why and the how and everything else. But just the value, right? And why it's so important to talk about, why people should volunteer, why people should just even think about volunteering, right? So we have, in Yemen, we have 300 staff approximately, or just over 300. But, staff is one thing, right? But implementation of this massive food response program that we're doing as well, or the WASH programs that we're doing, providing clean water and all that, and getting to people, right? We're almost all over Yemen. We're almost in 17 of the 22 governorates, the provinces there. But to get to all that, you have to have a lot of people that are committed to dedicating their time, not being paid for it, right? Not to say that the staff, and I'm sure HCI is the same way, that that they're making a lot of money doing it. They're just sacrificing a lot. They could be doing something else, or maybe earning more salary or whatever, but they're committing part of their life, sacrificing something else to help people. So we have 300 staff approximately in Yemen, and over 3,000 volunteers. Sure. So that's 10 to 1, right? And even institutions here, right? Al-Rashid here, Islamic Relief here. We have, Al-Rashid has a few staff members, but how many volunteers, do they get when they have an event or they have a big program that happens, right? The volunteer response is huge because you can't do it without the volunteers. Same with Islamic Relief. So in Edmonton, I probably crossed paths with probably close to, or over 100 volunteers over the last couple of years. And we've just seen an explosion, especially in youth, youth, that age group, I'm gonna say high school to university, just to kind of early graduation. That age group, I've seen a lot of engagement with that age group, right? And it's almost happened organically. And we kind of sit back and we try to analyze why that's happening. And, we can maybe get into that a little bit later, but I've seen that, alhamdulillah, that youth is getting more engaged on their own. Maybe they're more aware of what's going on, not just in Edmonton, but around the world. And they're just like, hey, I want to get involved, right? And so, we have a couple of staff members here in Edmonton, but our volunteers outnumber us, 40 to 1, really, right? So it's amazing to see that. We have a lot of youth engagement. I'm sure HCI has seen the same thing here with Sulaiman, that youth are willing to help. And I'm just saying youth, I'm saying anybody in general, right? But we've seen a lot more of that volunteer engagement than even though I started Islamic Relief helping them out, a few years ago in Edmonton. Our volunteer engagement was always good, but it's gotten even better over the last couple of years.
That's great.
And that's a blessing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so something that I noticed with both of you, you guys started off as volunteers, because sometimes when you start off as a volunteer, you think, they're just asking me to take something from A to B, right? And it gets pretty boring. But as you commit to the cause and as you engage, you get more and more responsible, and they give you more responsibilities, and it makes you a better person and stuff. So you guys aren't you guys started off as volunteers, a bunch of people, but you guys worked your way up. So how is that process of going up or climbing the ladder of being a volunteer, and how does that enrich your life per se? So who would, brother?
It's like anything you do, right? Once you derive satisfaction, right? That has to be, anything you do comes from within, right? It makes it easy, the process easy. So if you come in there, like I said, if you work from inside out or from inside out, it's easier, right? But if you start to work from outside, and so you have to start working as an individual, be sincere what you're doing, be honest what you're doing, have a goal, like you know what, you want to do something, not to benefit yourself only, but to benefit humanity at large, right? If you come with that mindset, you will succeed in moving not only up, you move mountains, especially the youth. Right now, we have the opportunity with organizations. They're there, right? And if you come out and like want to volunteer, it's not only volunteering, and but have a clear goal, a clear mindset of what volunteer is all about.
Okay,
You know.
Brother Omar,
Yeah.
you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on that. So, it's an evolution. It's a process that you go through. And to be honest with you, when I started volunteering, I volunteered at other organizations before Islamic Relief, and even when I was with Islamic Relief, I volunteered in parallel with other organizations as well too. But like Brother Sulaiman said, it's volunteers, they do come and go, right? But they are, a very valuable, part of the community, right? Because they're dedicating their time. So they do come and go. But some volunteers, they stick to something, right? They show commitment to it. And like what someone said, you develop from the inside out. So like your inner values, right? Your inner characteristics start to shine on the outside, right? So I've seen that with a lot of volunteers who show commitment and they stick around. They stick around through the slow periods and through the very, fast periods, and they stick around when things get really rough as well too. And I honestly did not ever intend to or never had the intention to say, I want to work for Islamic Relief, or I want to become, a manager with them, or whatever the case might be. I started off as a volunteer, stuck to it, and then because of the the work ethic that I put in with a great support system around, like myself and other volunteers, just dedicating ourselves, being authentic to the cause, and just doing it for, like Brother Sulaiman said, the bigger picture, right? There's people in need, so we're doing this for them. At the end of the day, by committing, by working hard, SubhanAllah, the opportunity was given to me, right? Okay, Ahmad, we have an opportunity. We want to, we like your work ethic. Would you consider joining our team on on an employment basis? So that's kind of how it worked out. But I put lots of years in as a volunteer at first. So, like Brother Mohammed said, keep, if you stick to something and you stay committed, and you work with sincerity, it starts to show. People start to see it, right? And that's kind of how my story kind of evolved with Islamic Relief. Like I wasn't chasing the opportunity, honest with you. SubhanAllah, Allah just gives you these things. Like you got to think about it. Why is Allah opening up these doors for you, right? So that maybe you can, influence others, influence other youth that come after you to kind of maybe repeat the same story as well too. Because it's really important to invest in youth when they're young, right? So that they can see what opportunities are available for them in their community, right?
Yeah, so you see, you were talking about investing into the youth, and you also talked about how some volunteers come and go.
Yeah.
And as we all know, the hardest part of becoming a volunteer is the initial process. So everyone puts in the effort, but some people end up leaving. And you talked about how a lot of volunteers, we've had a spark of volunteers, right? So where do you think the issue lies? Like, why do the volunteers end up going, and how do you think we can go about engaging the volunteers so they stay committed?
So this is I've had this conversation with a few different people before in the past, and talking about volunteer retention, right? Volunteer attrition. Sometimes volunteers might leave for various reasons. And one thing I've seen a lot with volunteers is burnout, right? Once people start getting into volunteering, they like to do it, and they just start taking on this and that. And sometimes they're students, they have a full-time, schedule, and they're also working part-time, and then they just start committing to this organization, that organization, and then they get really burnt out. So staying true to oneself and understanding your capacity. Right, being a volunteer doesn't mean you have to, keep working so hard that you burn yourself out. That you're only going to earn Allah's rewards if you burn yourself out. That's not true, right? So, we used, like I used to do that. Like at one point in time, I was on like, almost 3 different organizations at the same time, and other things as well were happening in my personal life, right? So I was getting burnt out, right? And I had to admit that to myself. So you had to look at like, okay, I'm more effective by committing, 100% of my, or 80% of my time to, these 2 things, rather than trying to commit 100% of my time to these 4 things, right?
Yeah.
So you have to like look at it that way, right? And see how you can be most, effective and efficient as well too as a volunteer. So burnout is one thing that, you got to look at if you're in it for the long term. Other volunteers, they have, whatever their other interests are in their life, and they want to volunteer just kind of casually. You got to respect that, right? So I'm sure, Brother Sulaiman experiences this with a lot of their events as well too, where we have our casual volunteers, and we leave it open, right? We're open, an open book to come in and go whenever you want, right? And then you have your committed volunteers who, know that they like Islamic relief, they like the charity sector, they want to stick to that, right? And they want to commit into that, and this is what their focus is going to be, right? And they're going to make time for it. So whether they have working full time, they have children, or whatever they're doing, they're going to commit because this is kind of their passion. So they volunteer for what they're passionate about. So there's different like segments of volunteers and whatnot, and it's it's a whole chapter that we could discuss, but those are some of the things I've noticed about how volunteers come and go. Yeah.
So, Brother Sulaiman, Brother Omar talked about like volunteers who go all out, they burn out. But I feel like there's also another spectrum of volunteers who are there, but they don't feel like they get the opportunity. So I'll talk about myself. So when I started volunteering, I signed up for this place to volunteer, right? But then I used to just sit at home and nobody used to contact me and give me stuff to do. And honestly, because it was the beginning and I wasn't really committed to the cause, so I didn't like go the extra step to like ask for opportunities. So how do you think we can help our youth with that?
Communication is one of the greatest tools, right? And that's been said. If you look at our Prophet ﷺ, right? How did he build a nation? How did he go about building a nation? It's by service, right? Service in people. Now, volunteer is a part of serving, right? So if you look at individual, if you like to help people, and at the same time you derive the satisfaction and you're given the opportunity, obviously, right? When I say opportunity, like you are free to do, like you come volunteer, yes, but you look at, okay, where do I want to go? I'm volunteering XYZ hours, but what's my end goal? Where am I going to go with this, right? So at the beginning, I said communication. The tools to bring the youth and to have volunteer is keep the line of communication open, free. Feel free to approach any organization, ACI, Islamic Relief, all things, and be open, right? And look forward that I'm here and there's opportunity in this, what I am doing, to move forward. Yes. But I mean, organization can do only so much, but it takes all of us as individual to work towards, what we like to accomplish. And that's been said when I said like service. If you are committed to serving people, it becomes easy. It becomes easy.
Yeah, Brother Omar,
I just want to add to that because we've experienced that before, right? Where you get a volunteer who comes in, participates, is active, and then they sit and they wait for the next opportunity, but then they might miss the announcement about it, or they miss the phone call, or whatever it is, or they just maybe saw but they're too busy. Then a long period of time goes without them being re-engaged, and that's something that also happens with volunteers, that they don't get re-engaged. So then they kind of just the relationship there kind of tails off. So my suggestion to volunteers, to people who have set goals in mind when they're volunteering, is to try to stand out from the crowd a little bit. And like Sulaiman said, if somebody isn't necessarily communicating with you, it doesn't mean because they're trying to ignore you. They might just have a lot on their plate, and they may have forgotten their what they wrote down to kind of follow up with you or whatever it is. But take that person's contact information and just kind of, stay, relevant in their mind, right? Keep knocking away at their door and just say, hey, look, this is my, ambition as a volunteer. I'm trying to earn volunteer hours for whatever, right? I'm trying to get into this professional school. I'm trying to do it for this, work experience or whatever I'm trying to do. Try to keep knocking, chipping away to achieve your goals, right? Don't let, silence kind of, deter the goals that you have in mind.
I see.
Yeah.
Stay focused and follow up in any situation. Don't hesitate to follow up. It can be with the organization or even on your job or whatever you're doing. You have to keep follow up because there's so many different things that organization and individuals are responsible for and are dealing with. But like I remember when I used to volunteer, I used to take the opportunity of going to the establishment and I said, do you need me?
Exactly. Yeah, that's great advice. Another thing I wanted to touch on was this whole concept of organizations, right? You guys all talk about how you represent a certain organization and stuff. So you guys are obviously from organizations that are like rather big. They're international, like Human Concern International, Islamic Relief. So they're global. Everyone knows about them. So but what I feel like sometimes people start becoming competitive about it. Like you guys are friends right now, and it's like all friendly. But sometimes people are like, oh, this guy's from a certain organization. I don't want to collaborate with them. So the whole concept of collaboration versus competition. How do you guys think we should go about that? Brother Sulaiman, you want to start?
It's a very good question. Yeah. My dream is that one day, that all these organizations is going to come together and say, look, this is what we are doing. We are here to solve, but that's, like I said, that's a dream. Okay? Collaboration, we as organization, I don't think there is competition. Maybe in raising funds here and there, yes. But if Islamic Relief cannot work in our organization, they will approach HCI, it's vice versa, right? We, at least from my point of view, at head office, we work together here, same here. We collaborate in doing things. But the big picture is our beneficiary, right? Like we are good in certain areas, Islamic Relief is very good in certain areas, so we work where we are good at, right? That's makes it easy for serving the people that needs help.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, like you said, I think it's there's organization and there's competition, but it depends on how you look at the competition. I think it's healthy competition, right? Like we are racing in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, like you said, the beneficiaries. And we can complement one another, right? Even if it's competition, it's healthy competition, you complement one another. So there might be areas that, a certain organization can access that the other organization cannot access for whatever reasons, right? Because there's a lot that, of systems and policies that we have to kind of go through to execute our field work, right? So, we can complement one another in terms of that sense. And there has been organization as well too, and collaboration between organizations when it makes sense as well too, right? So there has been, even recently here in Canada, we've done, a recent project together for COVID, right? So it does, we definitely have both in mind when we're, existing. We are obviously, our organizations run themselves like a business, like an organization. But, at the end of the day, the bigger picture, like Brother Sulaiman said, is the beneficiaries. And, the more that we can, get out there, the more that we can, help those who are actually in need of it, right?
That's good advice. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about external affairs. Now I want to talk about how internally, like when you're volunteering, a lot of times like your niyyah starts to sway away. So what I wanna ask you guys is, how do you guys keep your niyyah clean and your intention? Because you talked about how we're striving in the way of Allah, but how do we make sure that we're staying on the right path?
Okay, so this is definitely a good question, right? Because sometimes you do see it in people where they might start volunteering for a certain reason, but then they end up leaving for other reasons, right? Because their intention wasn't necessarily in the right place. Like if you come being authentic, you come being yourself, like, hey, I want to do this. Like I said, you have a goal in mind, right? While you're volunteering. And if you're there to try to achieve those goals, I think you're always going to keep your intention in check, right? But if you're there, you know, not even if you come and you're not certain, like, you know, what you're doing there, and which is we've seen a lot of, like it's kind of like our volunteer engagement. Again, it's happened organically. We've seen a lot of, and this is kind of a good thing with, you know, a recent trend I've seen. Maybe someone can comment on this as well too. But I've seen a, you know, recent trend with, you know, our volunteers, where there's, and I'm not trying to you know, discredit the value of, you know, institutions like the Masajid or other institutions like this, but we've seen volunteers come and participate in Islamic relief events and charitable, you know, causes that not necessarily always going to the masjid, if you know what I mean, right? And so these people, like, you know, like, okay, they have good intention, right? They just want something that they can get, you know, engaged in. So that they can, because they have, you know, everybody has a self-fulfillment that they want to do, right? If you, like, everybody is, like, and this is the way that we're created as human beings. You have something you want to fulfill within yourself, right? And nobody can judge you what that is exactly, right? Whether you are there to make friends, right? If that yours is your intention, okay, fine, that's great. It's a great, actually great place, environment to make, you know, good friends, because people are there for a good cause, right? Or if your intention is because I want to earn the sadaqah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The hasanat and all that, then, you know, that's your intention, sure, then follow that intention. But you have to, like, it's honestly, it's self-accountability at the end of the day to try and keep your intention in check. If your intention starts to sway a little bit, right, and isn't necessarily for good reason, it'll eventually show. And this, I'm talking from experience, like, it'll eventually show. Eventually kind of seep through the cracks, and it'll come out, it'll, you know, and you yourself will then probably lose commitment to the cause that you kind of started with.
But is it, Sulaiman?
You know, it is two things. Actions is by intention. And the other one is, show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. So if you are in a company that is going to encourage you to do the good things, then your intention and your action is going to come out in that scenario, right? So we have to make sure that whatever we are doing, first of all, we are doing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we look at what the end result is. And if the end result is to help the less fortunate people, like there's so much, the media is so much now, right? Everywhere you go, you can see. It depends which news you look at, right? You look at the news and you say, okay, this is what is happening here, this is what's happening. What can I do as a volunteer or as an individual, or which organization can I get involved with to do help in this situation, right? So
I see what you mean. Yep. And then you guys were talking about standing out as a volunteer. So what were some ways a starting volunteer who doesn't really know much about volunteering, but, you know, he's interested and he's passionate about it, he has the right niyyah, how do you think, what are actions you think that stand out amongst volunteers, if you would like to start?
Yes. So standing out amongst volunteers, to be honest with you, I think is easier than we might think it is. The reason I say that is because you know, I've observed a lot of you know, people that have come into, you know, our space to help us volunteer, who've stuck around for a long time. Some have kind of just tailed off. They still kind of, you know, appear, you know, at their convenience. Starting out as a volunteer, in my opinion, is you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't have to be, you know, the most well-dressed person in the room. Those aren't the reasons that people, you know, stand out in a crowd. You can stand out by staying committed and working hard. That'll eventually get noticed, right? And chasing opportunity. So, you know, let's say you came out as a volunteer the first time and you helped, you know, just kind of, you came to an event, helped us set up, you know, the space that we're in. And that's the first, you know, the first way you got involved with Islamic relief, first couple of times. But then eventually, you know, you say, you meet, you know, kind of the head organizer, the head, you know, volunteer manager, and you say, I want to get more involved. What can I do, right? keep me looped in as to what other activities I can participate in. I want to take initiative, right? I want to do a project on your behalf, right? So it's honestly that simple, right? I don't think it takes a lot of effort to try to stand out as a volunteer. Once you start doing something like that, it's just knowing what you want to do, right? And trying to chase those opportunities, right? And making noise, right? Kind of just staying relevant, staying in the forefront, of and seeking the opportunity really, right? Because nobody's gonna say, like, honestly, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want to run a campaign for Yemen, right? I want to go collect bottles for Yemen. I want to do a bike challenge for Yemen. We're not going to say no, right? Because we know at the end of the day, your intention is good, right? You're able to like do something that's going to help Islamic relief, which is to raise money to help people in need. And you yourself are becoming kind of an ambassador for Islamic relief or whatever organization you're trying to help out. So we're open to a lot of ideas, right? We've had a lot of volunteers come to us and say, hey, I want to, raise awareness about this cause or that cause, or I want to try and do this little project, that little project. And honestly, we are ready to empower the youth. We're ready to empower our volunteers, whatever age they come from, whatever project they're thinking about doing. We have a lot of that opportunity available. And so we're very supportive because we know how important it is to invest. Again, I'm going to say the word invest, how important it is to invest currently in our youth at a younger age so that they're ready to take on whatever challenges Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for them, when they're older, right? And they can prepare their children, right? And it's just a cycle, right? And this is kind of what we've come to learn, right? And so we're ready, to be honest with you, like, our motto is ready to answer the call. We're ready to answer the call, not just for, people that are, suffering around the world, but also ready to answer the call for the people, for our youth, for our community who desperately needs this type of activity, this type of outlet to really express themselves and show their potential, right? So there's a lot like that we can, because I know we've seen youth, mashallah, like you guys here are setting this like studio up, like this is amazing, right? So, there's a lot of potential and hidden talent that we have that we just got to be able to kind of, support, right, and let people cultivate those talents.
That's a great point because you always think about when people create initiatives, everyone feels like they have to go all out on like another tangent and create the whole like organization, while like organizations such as Islamic Relief have their own like setups that allow youth to like sustain and like go on and commit or start initiatives. And so, Brother Sulaiman, I wanted to ask you, so we talked about the benefits of volunteering, right? What's a side of volunteering that you don't think anyone other than a volunteer gets to experience? It's like the hidden gems of volunteering, if I would say so.
If I may add a little bit of what Brother Omar said, like when we mentioned like take initiative, right, is take a leadership role, right? Take responsibility. Be the diamond in the rough. Be the one that shines. If you want to move ahead where volunteer is concerned, you don't have to be, it's one step at a time. Gradually. That's how I started, right? I move gradually, right? Before if like Brother Omar said, in an organization, we let the individual, from my point of view, we let them go. Just let them, don't take a leadership role. Let them be, don't come and like expect, say you're volunteering that, oh, you have to do X, Y, and Z. No, be out there and be open of what you want to do.
See, you were talking about how you should like let the volunteers like do what they want, right? A big complaint.
Well, within a structure for sure. We have a system, not like, oh, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, but a big complaint that like volunteers, but the youth have in general nowadays is that the older people or like the leaders, they don't let them take initiatives. So and they restrict them and they tell like they basically make them feel as if they're not good enough. So what's a way to work around that? Do you think the lead or the older people in our society have to like give them more opportunity, or the youth like not understanding the adults?
The older people will be there, right? You look at them as a guide, right? The experienced people are going to be there. If you want to learn, you can improve on whatever the older people are doing. No question. Organization like us yes, we don't want to become stagnant, right? That's going to happen is by having the youth involved, right? Because they come out with the fresh ideas, they come out, and we implement it, right? But don't look at the organization structure and say, you know what, I am not going to follow it. There will be rules you have to follow, but at the same time, my philosophy is sometimes you can bend the rules. Sometimes you can even break the rules once it does not become a habit, right? But it's not the older people we have to look at, or the structure we have to. We have a look at the way how we can move forward to develop better organization so we can improve, I should say, improve in all ways that we are doing things. Because changes is one of the very difficult things for people to accept. We have to realize that as human beings, changes is not easy. But if you change from from the bottom up, it's easier from the top coming down, right? That means involve the people from the bottom. Right?
So you're telling us to lead by example, right? Okay. So would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Sulaiman makes some great points, right? Like our, elders in the community, they had their, their tasks, responsibilities that they had to achieve and adversity to overcome and projects they had to work on, right? So every generation is kind of given, a challenge in their era to work through. Right, so we have to respect, even if there's a little bit of resistance, that resistance probably comes from like a culture that's been adapted to, right? So this is kind of, let's say there's an organization that's run by, a group of people that have been there for so many years. They have their culture, right? But anytime anybody in that organization, the head of the organization, is open to cultural change, right? Then that's really important. Right, so if you as youth are getting involved, or younger inexperienced persons getting involved in an organization, and you see resistance to ideas or resistance to, trying innovative things and whatnot, that's probably just from the cultural thing, not so like a personal thing against that individual. I think it's more the kind of organizational culture thing, and so it's really important to look at how we can, change that culture sometimes within our organization, and I think, like you said, lead by example, right? Lead by example. Show the merit, show the benefit of doing something as youth, right? If you have to provide, it's like a business case. So this is my line of work kind of leads me to use some of this terminology, right? So like you're presenting a business case to like a board or to like your supporters or your investors, right? And you're going to show them like why you should do something, right? What the benefit is going to be. I think now more than ever, actually, our senior community members, and I say senior, I don't mean like older, I mean like experienced ones who have come before us and done a lot before us, like built the schools, built the masajid and all that, and built other organizations before HCI and Islamic Relief. In my opinion, I've seen them like really on alert, more so than ever, as to what is going to impact our current generation and our generations to come. And so I think now more than ever we're getting a lot of support, whether it's financially, whether it's in spirit, or whether it's getting volunteering or community support as well too. I think now more than ever you're getting a lot more of that support. And if you're still seeing resistance, then it's just it's upon the youth's responsibility, or that individual's responsibility, try and introduce some change slowly, because it takes some time to change the culture and the nature of an organization.
So you guys were talking about culture, right? So what are some things that your respective organizations have done to accommodate the youth and make them feel more safe and like welcomed into your organizations?
Well, for us, we've always had an open book policy, an open door policy with our organization when it comes to volunteering. And if you see our volunteers sitting in a room, you're gonna see, a plethora of different styles of people, right? And everybody respects everybody else. We've never had incidents where somebody felt, uncomfortable, or somebody felt like, I'm out of place, right? So we have a very open, welcoming environment. I think it gets instilled from like I was saying, kind of like the organizational leads. So when they're open-minded, when they're open to like volunteers and their way of expressive language, their way of their attire and whatever else, and their level of commitment to the deen as well too, then that creates an open space for volunteers and a safe space. Right, so when you come into our spaces and you volunteer with us and you feel very welcome, you feel very homey and all that, then you kind of spread the word to others, right? Honestly, I think that there's a lot has to do with branding, but also a lot has to do with word of mouth, right? So experience, people are going to talk about their experience, and so we've kept that policy, that culture, kind of that way, and it's been working for us so far.
So, Brother Sulaiman,
we encourage volunteers to present their projects, move forward, do projects, don't be scared, right? Anything you have, any kind of suggestion, any ideas, we encourage them and we support them in different areas. If you come and present a project, obviously we're going to do our due diligence and, say, yes, okay, this is a great project. Don't be scared of anything. Present what you have to do, share your ideas, be involved, be a community-based person, right? Take part in the activities that's around us. Encourage activities and be a community-based person. In that way, I mean, there's no resistance where organization is concerned in any ways to let our youth become leader. We promote it by participating in all different youth programs, right? Around the world, actually. Basically, that's one of our major things, to take care of children. It can be in Rohingya, it can be in Yemen, it can be in Somalia, wherever. We work with youths everywhere we go. So that should be a motivation for any youth that look around and see,
I see what you mean, yeah. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. For closing remarks, I just wanted to give it to you guys to like talk about anything you feel like that's worth mentioning about volunteering, just, few closing lines here and there. So would you like to start, Brother Omar?
Yeah, so just to kind of close up and summarize kind of what we've been discussing. Well, firstly, we still have, kind of bring the focus back on Yemen. We're creating platforms for people to be able to raise money for Yemen as well too. We have a launch good. I think the guys shared the graphics that show the launch good links. So that's one of the easiest ways to get involved, right? Is to actively try to raise awareness. So when you start fundraising, it's not necessarily that you're only fundraising with the intent to try to raise money. You're also, there's a couple of intents behind it, right? So you're also tackling the stone of like raising awareness about the issue, right? So when you share a segment of news about Yemen, so you create a launch good and you start sharing links and say, please donate to the cause. You're creating awareness as well too, right? So you're creating kind of like a domino effect. Raising money, but you're also raising the awareness. So we are doing that. We have upcoming as well too. We're going to create some other things as well for Yemen. So stay tuned. Check out our website, islamicrelief.ca. We have a lot of things on there as well to keep you posted. But kind of in closing about volunteering, if you've ever thought about volunteering and not, kind of being hesitant about it because you're like, you're not sure what, and that's, I remember that being one of the challenges for myself when getting into volunteering. Like, okay, do I want to go to the youth club, or do I want to go to there? Like, I don't know what the reception is going to be like. Might be hard to kind of break the ice. Will I have, anything in common with anybody else? But to be honest with you, go in with a, positive, with positive outlook, with a goal in mind, and take the, take that step, break the ice. So, with Islamic Relief, whether it's with HCI, with IFSA, with all these great organizations across the city, just go and experience something. And if you have a bad experience, don't walk away, holding that bad experience to yourself, right? Approach the organization or the project lead that happened to be there, whoever it is, and express why you had a bad experience, because maybe they can help you correct it or help correct that situation so that the next time you come, you have a great experience. If you go and have a good experience, spread the word, right? Volunteering, community engagement, community support. I think as a community, like Brother Sulaiman said, it'd be great to be united under one umbrella, but we have a common cause that we all work towards, whether it's building our own community or helping international communities or whatever the causes might be. We need to help develop, our youth, our young ones, our children from now, right? So that we can make them more alert, make them more aware of what's going on internationally, but also domestically. Domestically is very important too, like in our own communities. There's a lot of things we're working on as well too domestically to try and help improve societies, help improve communities as well too. So just take that initiative because you don't know where it could end up, right? You might end up actually, one day you woke up, you're in high school, you said, I want to become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, but then you start volunteering for, a humanitarian organization, and you might end up being, a person, a field officer working in the line of duty, in Somalia, in Lebanon, in Yemen, or wherever. So you don't know where the opportunity could lead. And it's great that we're thinking more about things like that, rather than kind of the typical, which is nothing wrong with it, right? Like becoming the doctors and the lawyers and the engineers and the teachers and all that, which are great professions. We need that. But also, the more we can do, other things, broaden our, experiences as a community, the more that we can empower ourselves to be able to do better and improve our community status across the globe, inshallah.
Sulaiman?
In HCI, we encourage volunteers to be part of the change, right? We're working around the world to help people. So to be a part of the change, you will show that you care, that you're taking responsibility, that you are helping the less fortunate people. HCI, we do encourage, the youths to take leadership role, right? And to be involved, present your project, like I said before, and don't be scared, and don't expect that, you're going to don't look for anything from this to be satisfied. Derive the satisfaction from within yourself, right? If you start doing that, volunteer become easy, right? Don't say like, oh, I volunteer tonight and that's it. This X, Y, Z happened, I'm out of here. Be prepared to take criticism. Be prepared to be strong, because constructive criticism is very, very, very good, right? But don't take anything personal in any situation, right? And look at ways to move forward, not as an individual only, but as a community, right? And if we start doing that, it becomes easy.
That's great advice. Jazakallah. You guys, even though I've been volunteering for a few years now, I've learned so much new stuff, talking to you guys, and it's been inspiring and illuminating. Now we're gonna move on to our third part, and we'd like to welcome our featured talent. And to close off, we'd like to feature someone from our community, the founder of Seytuun, a non-profit organization that supports the vulnerable members of our community. And he's an example of the sort of people that Brother Sulaiman and Brother Omar are trying to invite into the community. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brother Abdullahi Mohamed.
Assalamu alaikum.
You're making sweat there.
Like Abdullah just mentioned, I am one of the founders of Seytuun, and we are a non-profit dedicated to supporting the disadvantaged members within our communities. We started out supporting, I think a couple years ago, supporting disadvantaged youth, and so we'd have, a couple of events here and there. So just to name a few, we had a school drive for the youth within the local high schools within the city. We've had leadership and post-secondary workshops for disadvantaged youth. And now, as our organization is growing, we're deciding to spread out a little bit more and expand to just beyond, supporting youth and essentially everyone within our communities that need the help. And so currently, right now, we have a big project in the works. We're working with a lot of the charities within Edmonton right now. So yeah, expect something big within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Abdullahi. So this should be the end of our show today. That was episode 2 of Youth Strong. Like, subscribe, and share. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.